This presentation is about Electra House, a beautiful Art Deco building which occupied most of Temple Place on London's Victoria Embankment between its construction in 1933 and its demolition in 1996. In its day, it was the world's major international telegraph office and played a pivotal role during the war. Memories of it have been kept alive by the thousands of people who look back with nostalgia on their working lives at the best club in London. But it all began with this chap, Charles Wheatstone. He was born in Gloucester in 1802, and along with Sir William Fothergill Cooke, he invented and patented the first electric telegraph in 1837, the year that Queen Victoria came to the throne. Wheatstone was a musician, apprenticed to his father, who made musical instruments. During Charles' apprenticeship, he invented the bellows concertina, still in use today, as well as the stereoscope, which became one of the most popular scientific toys of the Victorian era. This is one of his inventions that changed the world. It enabled messages to be transmitted over wires, although at the time there was no reliable method of printing them. Wheatstone experimented by laying wires along the railway track between Euston and Camden. This, of course, is Isambard Kingdom Brunel, who was responsible for the Great Western Railway and the Great Eastern Steamship. The Great Eastern laid the first cable across the Atlantic, starting on the 27th of July, 1866. The cables were coated in waterproof gutta percha, and the signals were weak and needed to be boosted at intervals by repeaters built into the cable. This cable laying went on to become the Victorian World Wide Web. This is an 1880 telegraph printing machine, and as you can see, it has keys rather like a piano keyboard. The QWERTY keyboard that we know today was yet to be adapted to this kind of equipment. Meanwhile, Giacomo Marconi had been developing wireless equipment to send messages. This is Marconi's equipment being tested by post office engineers in 1897. Even then, technology was moving at a fast pace because there were a number of competitors eager to get into the mass communications market. And so, back to Electra House. It was for some years the headquarters of the semi-nationalised Cable and Wireless. Electra House became the hub of the International Telegraph Service, through which some 90% of overseas telegrams would pass each day. Telegrams from Hong Kong to Johannesburg or Buenos Aires to Mexico would pass through Electra House via the Imperial Telegraph cables, as they were once called. After full-scale nationalisation, overseas telegraphs was taken over by the GPO, which, like its predecessor, charged other telegraph companies for use of their telegraph routes, whether they be submarine, cable or wireless. This is a sepia and rather romantic view of Electra House in Temple Place. In the 1960s, when I was a boy, my father remarked to me that although Electra House was connected to every city in the world, not a single wire could be seen coming from it. During the war, it became not only the most major centre of telegraph traffic, but also the headquarters of government propaganda under Lord Halifax. The head of the Civil Service and Treasury, Sir Warren Fisher, appointed the chairman of Cable and Wireless, Campbell Stewart, to run the British government's propaganda department. It was funded by the Foreign Office, but on the strict instructions that all its activities were conducted away from Foreign Office premises. It was all centred in room 207 in Electra House, where a Reuters tape machine and wireless had been installed. All that keep calm and carry on propaganda started in that room. Electra House became a prime target for the Luftwaffe, and here it is bombed. Nevertheless, the important job of keeping communications between the United States and the colonies, including Australia and all other countries, carried on. In spite of the destruction, staff did indeed keep calm and carry on, even while the building was being blasted by bombs. Even in times of war, bureaucracy never stops, and these are the official reports of bomb damage to Electra House. This is room 2, Electra House, where a large number of overseas telegraph circuits were manned. A very loud room with teleprinters chattering away 24 hours a day, non-stop. Here's a chap on the Accra telegraph circuit, and he's using 5-unit slip tape, which we had to read at 16 words a minute. And here it is on a tuition card that we all had to learn. And there's another example of it here. It had to go into the tape reader the right way round, of course. And here's Lord Louis Mountbatten outside Electra House in 1947. What was he doing here? Well, he was inaugurating the very first picture service between London and Malta.
Crowds, cameramen and a guard of honour greeted Lord and Lady Mountbatten when they arrived at Electra House, London, the cable and wireless headquarters. Object of the visit was to inaugurate the photo-telegraph service between London and Malta, a new link with the George Cross Island. The picture, taken a few minutes before, is the first to be transmitted, and Lord Mountbatten himself starts the machine, which flashes it across to the Mediterranean. A message of goodwill was also sent to Malta's governor, who later sent back a reply.
The picture room was a very important department in Electra House. During the Cuba crisis, it was sending pictures of the principal characters, Fidel Castro, Khrushchev, and of course President John F. Kennedy, around the world. The teleprinters relaying news never stopped for a second. But as businesses began to get teleprinters themselves, the telegram service had to meet new challenges.
In this London businessman's office, the call has been put through to Edinburgh, and by merely switching over, the operator connects the telephone line to the teleprinter in readiness for the transmission of an actual telegram. Is Edinburgh receiving the call? London switches to teleprinter. Edinburgh does likewise. Now we're all set for sending the message. By depressing the Who Are You key, the operator makes certain that she is through to the right number. The machine can transmit 60 words a minute, and when a telegram costs 1 shilling for 12 words, think of the canny Scot getting his money's worth out of the teleprinter. The additional advantage over the telephone system is that one receives written instead of verbal communications under conditions of complete secrecy. Further, it prints the message at the receiving station whether anyone is present or not. Here is the telegram, full of complicated figures, received in Edinburgh, nearly 400 miles away. The whole transmission taking only a matter of seconds.
Nevertheless, millions of telegrams were being phoned into Electra House each year. This is the phone room, and one of my jobs was to take cables down on the phone. They were transmitted daily around the world and through the Electra House Overseas Telegram Relay Unit. Messages were relayed between continents and capitals. The telegraph equipment used in Electra House was quite varied, but it was very well made, usually by the Creed company, and all their products were extremely reliable. They had to be, because they worked 24 hours a day. These machines were used on the South American route to Buenos Aires, or the Sam's cable as we called it. They all operated on Morse signals, and upon the paper tape which came out of them were printed dots and dashes. Morse operators wearing earphones could usually tell who was sending the message on the opposite end of the undersea cable due to the speed and tempo of the person using the Morse key. In time, the teleprinters improved, and instead of gummed tape with the words printed on it coming out of the side of the machine, the printers produced paged copies which were torn off, ready to place in envelopes or to be forwarded on to other destinations. This lady is sending a message on an old-fashioned teletype machine, and I would say this photograph was taken in the 1950s. Another operator is seen here sticking down a message on a telegram form. We had to be able to gum down messages at 50 words a minute. Most telegrams were business and commercial, but people loved to send greetings telegrams. I really do wish I had stuck one of these in my pocket at Electra House before they were all no doubt consigned into a skip. It's an industrial antique now. It's called a gumming trough that was filled with water, and the gummed paper tape passed through it so that the operator could stick it to the form. These chaps here, two of whom I knew, are using the much more modern equipment, 7DRP printers with punched tape coming out of the side. This tape could be used to put into a transmitter. And here in room 2 is the Sydney circuit, which I always enjoyed working on because it was very busy and every message was in English, so it was easy to spot errors. Every telegram was numbered, of course, with a serial number that identified which circuits it arrived on. Then it was timed with this clunky bit of kit that sounded like a gunshot every time you put a telegram into it, and all the messages were circulated around the building using a complex system of conveyor belts made of leather. Millions of overseas telegrams passed through these belts every year. If a telegram was for a local or London address, a team of dispatch riders on motorcycles would be leaving the buildings at all hours of the day and night, whatever the weather, and the ladies in this photograph delivered telegrams during the wartime years. Post office cable and wireless services were doomed when the Post Office Corporation became British Telecom. Busby had arrived, and the public were being urged to install more telephones and make more phone calls. Busby's voice was that of the late Bernard Cribbins.
From Purley to Barnet, from Hayes to Dagenham, it's so cheap to phone all over London. Whoops! A local call takes you as far as the eye can see. Eh? Oh, sorry. Further than the eye can see. Ah, Busby here. Who? Oh, yes. It's for you, my lord.
But we all remember Maureen Lipman and her Ology advert for British Telecom.
I failed.
You failed? What do you mean you failed?
I failed. Maths, English, physics, geography, German, woodwork, art. I failed.
You didn't pass anything?
Pottery.
Pottery? Very useful. Anthony, people will always need plates. Anything else?
And sociology.
An ology? He gets an ology and he says he's failed. You get an ology, you're a scientist.
Whether it's well done or hard luck, a phone call says a
The
lot.
most brilliant boys, the teachers who were wrong, you know, they can't mark. A lot of them can't see.
British Telecom. It's you we answer to.
But it all had to be modernised, and in the 1980s new equipment replaced machines like this, which I spent many hours on. Here I am in 2 photographs taken in the 1970s. Eventually the computer age came to telegrams, but it was a dying industry. The tele-message service, which was supposed to replace telegrams, was an absolute disaster. Much of the operation moved to this ghastly office block, Cardinal House, in Farringdon Road, itself now demolished as part of London's Crossrail route. And it was goodbye to Electra House, the greatest club in London, which I was recruited into in 1966, having seen this advertisement. The building had a huge restaurant, a bar and even a chapel. This is the saddest picture of all, its demolition. Today we can send messages to anywhere in the world from the phone in our pocket, but many of those WhatsApps and Instagrams still pass through the cables that leave this little Victorian building in Porthcurno in Cornwall, not far from the Porthcurno Museum of Global Communications, which I urge you to visit. Thanks for watching.